This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. Good morning, I'm John Trout. It's Friday, November 1st, 2024. Here's what's coming up on America in the Morning.
Harris hits Trump on recent remarks about women as Trump focuses on the Biden administration's border policies. I'm John Stolnis.
It's not just the race for president that Americans are watching.
Because we clearly have to change the direction of this country.
I'm Clayton Neville.
A deal may be close to get striking Boeing workers back on the job. Lisa Dwyer will have the latest. Plus, the newest wrinkle concerning ballots from Pennsylvania. Correspondent Norman Hall has details.
On Wall Street, November trading begins today after a down October for the markets with a tech sell-off yesterday. I'm Jessica Ettinger.
An actor who appeared in Dances with Wolves has been indicted again on sexual abuse charges. I'm Ed Donahue.
Time to roll back the clocks. I'm Bob Brown. That story coming up.
All ahead on America in the Morning. Both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump hit some of the western battleground states, Arizona and Nevada, with a Trump stop in New Mexico to start the day. John Stolnis has the latest on the campaign trail.
Trump visited New Mexico despite polling that shows him trailing the vice president in that state by 5 to 7 points. Trump says he doesn't believe the numbers and wanted to make an appearance there despite his advisors telling him it was a waste of time.
So I'm here for one simple reason. I like you very much, and it's good for my credentials with the Hispanic or Latino community.
Later, Trump traveled to Henderson, Nevada, making promises on the economy and immigration.
Your vote in this election, I will end inflation. I will stop the massive criminal, and you see it, the criminal invasion. Some horrible, deathly people. We're not going to allow it. They're destroying our country. We will stop it immediately.
Trump ended the day with an appearance at a Tucker Carlson hurricane relief rally in Arizona. Harris, meanwhile, spent the day working to further exploit a gender gap that shows her up 12 points among women in a CBS News poll out this week. Harris responded to remarks Trump made at a Wisconsin rally on Wednesday night, saying he would protect women in America whether they liked it or not.
He simply does not respect the freedom of women or the intelligence of women to know what's in their own best interest and make decisions accordingly.
That CBS News poll shows Trump ahead with men by 9 points. At that same rally, Harris's speech was interrupted by people protesting the Biden administration's approach to the plight of the Palestinians in Gaza.
Hey guys, you know what? Here's the thing. Let's talk for a moment about Gaza. We all want this war to end and get the hostages out, and I will work on it full time when I am elected president, as I've been.
Later, at a rally in Reno, Nevada, Harris urged voters in the state to vote for a ballot issue that would make it a state constitutional right for a woman to have an abortion.
One does not have to abandon their faith or reasonably held beliefs to agree that the government should not be telling her what to do with her body.
The analytics firm TargetSmart finds about 1.2 million more women than men have voted early across the 7 battleground states, a good early sign for Democrats. I'm John Stolnis.
While the majority of focus ahead of Tuesday's election is on the presidential race, politicians are reminding Americans about the significance of Senate races as control of the Senate hangs in the balance. Correspondent Clayton Neville reports.
The presidency clearly important, but control of the Senate very much significant too as we look toward Election Day. A key race in Republicans' quest to get control from Democrats comes out of Texas, where Senator Ted Cruz is being challenged by Democratic Congressman and former NFL player Colin Allred, who was backed by former President Barack Obama this week in a phone call posted to social media.
You've been a leader on and off the field, and it's showing in terms of how you're trying to reach out to everybody.
Millions of dollars spent from outside Texas in the Democratic effort to oust Cruz, and Senate Republicans are pointing the finger at leadership, specifically Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Senator Rick Scott spoke with Fox News.
McConnell's not helping Ted. He's not helping me. We've got to have new leadership. I'm running to be the Republican leader, and if we're a majority, be the majority leader, because we clearly have to change the direction of this country.
House Speaker Mike Johnson also on Fox.
If you want to end the madness of the Biden-Harris policies, the woke progressive left, and all the things they've done to us on the border, the economy, crime, the weakness on the world stage, this is our opportunity.
Leader McConnell blamed by some for not spending enough money this election season. Senator Cruz says that he hasn't received anything from the Senate Leadership Fund, which is run by McConnell. Now, as far as the issues, abortion seemingly leading the way in Democrats' effort on the campaign trail, promoting women's rights and potential threats surrounding those rights under Republican leadership. Jim Henson directs the Texas Politics Project poll, which asked voters which issues are driving them to the polls.
Overall, the economy and this bucket of issues around the economy and people's sense of the cost of living and rising prices are still front of mind for both Republicans and Democrats.
Tight races with serious national implications in other states like Ohio and Wisconsin. And in Nebraska, incumbent Republican Deb Fischer running 2% ahead of independent challenger Dan Osborne. I'm Clayton Neville.
Today's top stories are brought to you by Sleep Number. Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed? It's the only bed that lets you make each side firmer or softer whenever you want. Save 40% on the Sleep Number Special Edition smart bed. To find a store near you, visit sleepnumber.com. When we return on America in the Morning, Pennsylvania election ballots in question after these messages. Welcome back. You're with America in the Morning. The severity of storms headed toward the east. Let's find out. Here's AccuWeather.com meteorologist LaTroy Thornton.
The latest cold front should look less and less impressive as it approaches the east coast. Will pass through the region later today, but a lack of energy in the atmosphere and not quite enough moisture in place won't support much more than just a shower from the mid-Atlantic into southern New England. There can be a somewhat greater risk for a shower or two in northern New England, especially in Maine, but most other places will simply end up with rather gusty winds through the day, possibly reaching 35 to 40 miles per hour in spots for a time. These strong winds, combined with drier air arriving in the wake of the front and the dry ground in place due to what was the driest October on record in some spots, will present the risk for the rapid spread of any fires that may start in the region. However, the tail end of the very same front will link up with much more robust moisture from the Gulf of Mexico over the southern states, bringing enhanced rainfall in the form of thunderstorms to places from Texas to Louisiana and parts of Mississippi, with at least some showers also likely from Tennessee into West Virginia at times, mainly early. Behind the front, cooler and drier air spreads from the upper Midwest through the Great Lakes states today, following a Thursday that brought some showers at times, along with some accumulating early season snow for parts of the area yesterday. The West, particularly the Northwest, faces another day of rain near the coast and showers of rain and high elevation snow inland, thanks to a new storm sliding into the region. The steadiest, heaviest rain may end up near the coast from southern Washington to northern California, where there can even be some thunder. For Philadelphia, expect a morning shower, then brightening skies with breezy conditions and a high of 78. In Houston, watch for showers and storms in the area under cloudy skies with a high of 83. That's the nation's weather. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist LaTroy Thornton.
I'm John Trout. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. An end to the union workers' 7-week strike against plane maker Boeing may be in sight. Correspondent Lisa Dwyer reports that the machinists and management have agreed to an offer and will vote on a new contract next week.
The International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers says that its members will vote Monday on the latest proposal from Boeing. The union says Boeing is now offering general wage increases of 38% over 4 years, up from 35% in an offer that was rejected last week. The 7-week-old strike has shut down production of most Boeing airline planes. The union originally demanded 40% in raises over 3 years and restoration of traditional pensions. But Boeing has not budged on the pension issue. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
Thousands of ballots are at stake in Pennsylvania, where Republicans have asked the state's highest court to put on hold a decision on mail-in ballot envelope rules. Correspondent Norman Hall explains.
The state and national GOP filed an emergency request with Pennsylvania's Supreme Court that justices put on hold a ruling that envelopes voters use to send in mail ballots don't need to have been accurately hand-dated, as required under state law. The judges emphasized they were ruling on an election that has already occurred. Pennsylvania is the largest swing state in the close presidential race, and its voters are also filling a U.S. Senate seat, 3 statewide offices, and most of the legislature. I'm Norman Hall.
In sports from the NFL, the 6-3 Houston Texans fall to the 3-6 New York Jets, 21-13. When we return on America in the Morning, tech sell-off, jobs Friday, inflation numbers, business news is next with Jessica Ettinger after these messages. Welcome back. This is America in the Morning. The Business Report is brought to you by Fisher Investments. Fisher Investments is a fiduciary, always putting clients' interests first. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Here's CNBC's Jessica Ettinger.
Wall Street opens this morning to start November trading. It's also a jobs Friday. After stocks dropped yesterday to finish off a losing month of October for the major averages, disappointing quarterly results from both Microsoft and Facebook parent Meta triggered that tech sell-off yesterday. The Dow and the S&P 500 index broke 5-month winning streaks.
Pretty big moves in the individual stocks. It's worth a reminder that sometimes the whole group kind of gets swayed this way and that. We had a positive follow-through from Alphabet and negative now from Meta and Microsoft.
CNBC's Mike Santoli. Apple out with mixed quarterly results after the closing bell last night, but there were some indicators that iPhone 16 demand is holding up. Amazon shares popped last night in extended trading on its quarterly results. Intel shares soaring 15% after its results after the bell yesterday, a strong initial reaction to the quarterly performance. Inflation keeps falling, this time to its lowest in 3.5 years. In the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, the Fed's favorite measure of inflation.
Year-over-year price index, exactly 2.1, which was expected, 1/10 smaller than our last look at 2.2.
CNBC's Rick Santelli. Fewer people applied for unemployment benefits last week, just 216,000, as job cuts remained at historically healthy levels. That is below the pre-pandemic average. Today is a jobs Friday. We're going to get the big employment report from the Labor Department for October this morning. After ADP's incredibly strong report for the month showed nearly 250,000 new private sector jobs were created. New Starbucks CEO Brian Niccol, who just came from Chipotle, gave CNBC an interview. He says he's going to fundamentally change Starbucks' strategy. After the third straight quarter of falling sales, wait times for drinks have to come down. The menu has to be simplified, and Sharpies are coming back so baristas and customers can connect.
We're going to get back to doing that. We're tracking down the Sharpies, and we're going to get back to, writing little notes on the cups. It may not be everybody's name because, but we will definitely be getting back to writing on cups again here in the not-too-distant future.
Starbucks CEO Brian Niccol on CNBC. He also vows no price increases over the next year. On today's watch list, that jobs report comes at 8:30 Eastern. We get quarterly results from ExxonMobil and Chevron. New in theaters, Searchlight Pictures' A Real Pain, Apple TV Plus's Blitz, and the Tom Hanks TriStar Pictures film called Here.
Thank you, CNBC's Jessica Ettinger. When we return on America in the Morning, spring forward, fall back after these messages. Back now on America in the Morning. There are new criminal charges against a Native American actor who appeared in an Oscar-winning movie, Correspondent Ed Donahue reports.
Nathan Chasinghorse is accused in Nevada of sexually abusing indigenous women and girls for decades. It expands on a previous felony charge of sexual assault, lewdness, and kidnapping. Last year, the Nevada Supreme Court ordered the dismissal of Chasinghorse's original 18-count indictment, while leaving open the possibility charges could be refiled. Best known as Smiles a Lot in the 1990 movie Dances with Wolves, Chasinghorse was born on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, a member of one of the 7 tribes of the Lakota Nation. He later proclaimed himself a traveling Lakota medicine man. Prosecutors say he used that to gain the trust of vulnerable indigenous women and girls, leading a cult and taking underage wives. I'm Ed Donahue.
Well, check your watch or your smartphone. This is the weekend. Bob Brown reports on what happens when we switch back to daylight saving time.
It's that time of year again when we roll back the clocks to standard time. The good news is you'll gain an hour of sleep and won't be dressing for work or school in the dark. However, the end of daylight saving time means less sunlight by late afternoon, and you'll most likely be coming home from work in the dark. For years, there's been talk of keeping a permanent daylight saving time. In fact, the so-called Sunshine Protection Act was passed by the Senate, but the bill remains dormant in the House. So you'll be rolling back your clocks 1 hour before you go to bed Saturday night with standard time beginning 2 a.m. Sunday morning. And a reminder, don't forget to set the clock back in your car, although some will automatically adjust to the new time. In March, we roll the clock forward 1 hour in most of the U.S. for the beginning of daylight saving time. I'm Bob Brown.
Also a good reminder this weekend to replace batteries in smoke detectors. America in the Morning for Friday, November 1st, 2024 is produced by Jeff McKay. Senior producer Kevin Delaney. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One. This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. I'm John Trout. Coming up this half hour, we'll let you know where the campaign leads to Donald Trump and Kamala Harris today, along with anxiety about the 2024 vote.
The U.S. expects some 8,000 North Korean troops that are now on Ukraine's border to be sent into combat. I'm Ed Donahue.
Violence raging in the Middle East and a continued plea from the rest of the world. I'm Clayton Neville.
Police believe a mom and her 2 kids' jump into Niagara Falls was intentional. I'm Pamela Furrer.
The pace of inflation has slowed to its lowest level in 3.5 years. Jennifer King, Washington.
Google being fined for curtailing free speech in Russia. I'm tech correspondent Chuck Palm.
Back after these messages. This is America in the Morning. Welcome back. How far inland will that storm in the west proceed this weekend? Here's AccuWeather.com meteorologist LaTroy Thornton.
As a new wave of energy pushes on shore in the Pacific Northwest through the day today, the result will be another round of rain from near the coast to western parts of Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. In fact, there can even be some rumbles of thunder embedded within the heaviest downpours in that zone, especially from southwestern Washington southward. Otherwise, there can be some snow, perhaps heavy at times, through the high ground from Northern California into the southern Oregon Cascades, with snow coming down at a somewhat lesser clip through the mountainous terrain of Washington state. To the east of there, more showery conditions can be expected as far east as south central Idaho and even western Montana, with some snow again expected at the higher elevations as much chillier air continues to hang over the area. Through Saturday, areas of rain and snow are expected to extend through central California and much of Nevada and Idaho, with the Four Corners area staying dry. Dry conditions are also in store for the northern and central plains today, as well as the Great Lakes region. However, a push of increased moisture from the Gulf of Mexico will fuel thunderstorms in parts of the south today, mainly from Louisiana into much of the eastern half of Texas, with the risk for a storm also extending northwestward into the Texas Panhandle by late in the day. Most of the rest of the southeast looks dry to end the work week, outside of some spotty showers from the Atlantic coast of Florida into South Carolina. For the east, a cold front will lose steam as it approaches the eastern seaboard later today, but there can be a shower around from central Virginia through much of New England. Behind the front, the main story will be rather gusty winds of perhaps 35 to 40 miles per hour, which will combine with the very dry ground to create a heightened fire risk through the day. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist LaTroy Thornton.
I'm John Trout. You can follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. Heading into the last weekend before Election Day will be a busy one for both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. The former president will be holding rallies this afternoon in Warren, Michigan, before traveling to Milwaukee for an evening event and then heading to Virginia and North Carolina Saturday. While their paths will not exactly cross, the vice president will also be holding rallies in Milwaukee and crisscrossing Wisconsin throughout the day. Harris will also be in North Carolina Saturday with multiple events, including a rally featuring rock star Jon Bon Jovi. The latest polling has Harris ahead of Trump in Wisconsin by just 1%, and Trump leading Harris by 1% in North Carolina, all polling well within their margins of error. Nationwide, all of the battleground states have polls showing a virtual dead heat between Harris and Trump. Polling for president and many local and state elections are also very close. As correspondent Donna Warder reports, there's a new poll. Yes, new numbers suggesting most Americans are feeling anxiety and frustration heading into Election Day.
7 in 10 Americans who responded to a poll by the Associated Press and the Nork Center for Public Affairs Research say they're feeling anxious or frustrated about the 2024 presidential campaign. Only 1/3 say they feel excited. Even though the 2020 election happened during a deadly pandemic, some voters say they're even more anxious now than they were 4 years ago. About 80% of Democrats say they're anxious about this election, up slightly from around 75% in 2020. A little more than 66% of Republicans say they're anxious about this election, compared to 60% of Republicans in 2020. Donna Warder, Washington.
Concerns about the war in Ukraine growing into a wider conflict seem to be increasing. The United States is raising alarms over thousands of North Korean troops imported by the Kremlin to join Russian forces on the front lines. Ukraine claims that Russia has brought in both North Korean soldiers as well as civilians to work in military factories. Correspondent Ed Donahue reports that in an interview with a South Korean news station, Volodymyr Zelensky said, regardless of who wins the U.S. election, Ukraine will not cede any territory, nor will it surrender.
The evidence now suggests that North Korea has sent around 10,000 soldiers to train in eastern Russia. And some of these DPRK troops have already moved closer to Ukraine, and we're seeing them outfitted with Russian uniforms and provided with Russian equipment.
The U.S. expects some 8,000 North Korean troops that are now on Ukraine's border to be sent into combat. The announcement was made by Deputy United States Ambassador at the UN, Robert Wood.
Should DPRK soldiers be used in the battlefield, this would mark a further and serious escalation of the conflict.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Russians have been training North Korean troops with the intention of fully using them in frontline operations.
We now assess that there are some 10,000 North Korean soldiers in total in Russia. And the most recent information indicates that as many as 8,000 of those North Korean forces have been deployed to the Kursk region. Russia has been training DPRK soldiers in artillery, UAVs, basic infantry operations, including trench clearing, indicating that they fully intend to use these forces in frontline operations.
Blinken also said Vladimir Putin's troops are suffering.
It's desperate. Putin has been throwing more and more Russians into a meat grinder of his own making in Ukraine. Now, he's turning to North Korean troops. And that is a clear sign of weakness.
Kremlin forces have struggled to push back a Ukrainian incursion into Kursk. The Russian representative at the UN Security Council did not respond.
All of this reinforces why we have to remain focused on maintaining peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific and on the Korean Peninsula in particular, even as we work with European partners to respond to the DPRK's deepening security relationship with Russia.
I'm Ed Donahue.
The war in the Middle East is becoming increasingly violent, and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is laying out what it would take to reach a potential ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. Correspondent Clayton Neville has that story.
A series of rocket attacks from Lebanon struck northern Israel on Thursday, killing 7 people. This as deadly exchanges continue between Lebanese militant group Hezbollah and Israeli forces, in the wake, of course, of Hamas's attacks on Israel last year and amid the continued retaliation in Gaza. This as the world ramps up its efforts to call for a ceasefire in the Middle East.
We are working very hard and making progress on reaching understandings of what would be required for the effective implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701. This would be the basis of a diplomatic resolution to the crisis. It's important to make sure that we have clarity, both from Lebanon and from Israel, about what would be required under 1701 to get its effective implementation.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken went on with some specifics.
The withdrawal of Hezbollah forces from the border, the deployment of the Lebanese armed forces, the authorities under which they'd be acting, an appropriate enforcement mechanism.
Blinken insisted the U.S. has made progress.
We still have more work to do, but that's what's necessary to get us to a diplomatic resolution, including through a ceasefire.
Meanwhile, word that Iran is preparing a retaliatory strike on Israel from Iraqi territory led to a rise in oil prices, the uncertainty of war with global implications. I'm Clayton Neville.
Coming up, tragedy at Niagara Falls. And Google seeing red over the latest lawsuits. When America in the Morning continues after these messages. I'm John Trout. You're with America in the Morning. Welcome back. A woman and her 2 young sons are presumed dead after they crossed over a safety rail and leaped into Niagara Falls. Pamela Furr has more details into what police are calling an intentional act.
So far, New York State Police do not have a motive in the case. Here's Trooper James O'Callahan.
We come to the conclusion that a mother, 33-year-old mother, a 9-year-old son, and then a 5-month-old were all gone over the falls. Now, we do believe it is intentional.
He says the 3 crossed the safety rail and went over the falls on Luna Island around 9 o'clock Monday night.
The best we can do for the families is to, down the road, recover the bodies if we can, and, at least have that closure for the family. The why is going to be a very difficult question for us to ask.
O'Callahan says so far their investigation has not produced any clues or red flags as to why she would make this decision. He also says what eyewitnesses told the police was alarming, but has not revealed exactly what was said.
Everyone in the family that we've contacted, even the fathers of the children, have been very cooperative. They've been very forward with us with all information.
Now, the New York Post has found the woman's social media accounts that show she was distraught over a breakup. But again, police are not saying if they know exactly why she intentionally jumped. The search for the bodies continues. I'm Pamela Furr.
If you're struggling with thoughts of suicide or worried about a friend or loved one, call or text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline on your cell phone at 988 for free. Confidential, emotional support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A key inflation gauge closely tracked by the Federal Reserve dropped last month, news that could have an impact on the 2024 election. Correspondent Jennifer King reports.
The pace of inflation has slowed to its lowest level in 3.5 years, according to the latest report from the Commerce Department. Prices rose 2.1% in September compared to a year ago, according to the PCE index. But inflationary pressures remain. Core prices, excluding food and energy, were up 0.3% from August. That increase is higher than the Fed would prefer, and if it remains elevated, could lead the central bank to slow its pace of rate cuts. Meanwhile, consumer spending was up 0.5% from August to September, and income was up 0.3%, with Americans cutting back on saving. In a White House statement, President Biden celebrated the data drawing so close to the Federal Reserve's 2% target, but said there was more to do. On Friday, the government issues the October jobs report, the last major economic data to be released before the election. Jennifer King, Washington.
We've all heard the stories before, the government paying $20,000 for a hammer, $10,000 for a toilet seat. Overspending's been known to happen at the Pentagon, and correspondent Norman Hall reports a recent audit found Boeing has been overcharging on Air Force parts for cargo planes.
According to the Pentagon's Inspector General, Boeing overcharged the Air Force nearly $1 million for spare parts on C-17 cargo planes, including an 8,000% markup for simple lavatory soap dispensers. The Defense Department's auditor reviewed prices paid for 46 spare parts for the C-17 from 2018 to 2022 and found that at least 12 were overpriced. The soap dispenser prices were reviewed after a hotline tip. Since 2011, the government has awarded Boeing more than $30 billion in contracts to purchase needed spare parts for the C-17, one of the military's largest cargo aircraft. I'm Norman Hall.
Google has been fined by a Russian court an astronomical amount for failing to allow Russian channels to post information about the Ukraine war, and the fine doubles every week until it's resolved. Here's Chuck Palm with that in today's Tech Report.
Google apparently owes the Kremlin more than 2 undecillion rubles. That is 2 followed by 36 zeros. According to a Russian court, this is the fine they have imposed on Google for pulling out during the Ukraine war. To try to understand the magnitude of the figure, this is 20 decillion, or around $20 billion trillion. That dwarfs the size of the global economy. Currently, Google's parent company Alphabet has a market value of about $2 trillion, nothing to scoff at. The Russian state media TASS reported earlier this week that a Russian court had ordered Google to restore the YouTube channels, of several of which have been blocked since 2022. The court levied penalties, which apparently were doubling every week. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov admitted that he can't even pronounce the number and that it is filled with symbolism, but Google should not be restricting the actions of broadcasters on its platform. Follow me on X at Chuck Palm.
Friday Sports with our Robert Workman.
Aaron Rodgers fired 3 touchdown passes to lead the Jets over the Texans 21-13 last night in the lid lifter for NFL Week 9. That ends New York's 5-game losing streak. Rodgers connected twice with Garrett Wilson and once with Devontae Adams, their first TD together since the good old days in Green Bay. 12 games coming up Sunday afternoon, including the Lions and the Packers. Sunday night it'll be the Colts at the Vikings. Monday Night Football has the Buccaneers at the Chiefs. NBA, the Spurs stopped the Jazz 106-88, a game-high 25 points for Victor Wembanyama, who also had 9 rebounds, 7 assists, 5 steals, and 5 blocks. It's the second 5-by-5 game of his brief career. Only 2 players in NBA history have had more. Hakeem Olajuwon did it 6 times, Andrei Kirilenko 3. Utah is now 0-5, the last winless team this season. Grizzlies coasted past the Bucks. Ja Morant with a triple-double to counter 37 from Giannis Antetokounmpo. Milwaukee 1-4 to start the season. Suns rallied from down 21 to sink the Clippers. Devin Booker had 40, and the Rockets held off the Mavericks. Hockey, the Capitals scored 3 in the third, including number 858 for Alex Ovechkin as they topped the Canadiens 6-3. Hurricanes blew out the Bruins 8-2, 2 goals each for Jack Roslovic and Andrei Svechnikov, 5 straight wins for Carolina. Penguins stop a 6-game slide with a 2-1 overtime win over the Ducks. Sidney Crosby had both goals. Flyers, Maple Leafs, Oilers, and Sharks win. 136 baseball players became free agents yesterday, one day after the end of the World Series. Another 64 have pending options that could add them to the list by Monday. NASCAR playoff race number 9 is Sunday in Martinsville. And college football week 10, Saturday, number 1 Oregon is at defending national champion Michigan. In Happy Valley, number 3 Penn State hosts 4th-ranked Ohio State. And number 2 Georgia takes on Florida in Jacksonville in what is most definitely not the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. So don't bother calling it that, no sirree, Bob. That's Friday Sports.
Thank you, sir. Robert Workman on sports. A remarkable look at everyday life when America in the Morning continues after these messages. We're back. This is America in the Morning. It seems like we're all trying to prepare for Election Day and beyond, and as entertainment correspondent Margie Zaraletta reports, this includes planning for the upcoming guest hosts for NBC's Saturday Night Live.
Comedian and actor Bill Burr will return for his second stint as host of Saturday Night Live on November 9th. The significance of that is it will be the first SNL after the presidential election. Producer and musician McGee will be the musical guest. Charlie XCX will be both the host and musical guest on November 16th. This week's SNL will feature John Mulaney as host and Chappell Roan as guest musician. I'm Archie Zarletta.
A new Tom Hanks film takes a look at the extraordinary world of everyday life. Kevin Carr has a sneak peek at Here.
Tom Hanks and Robin Wright reunite with director Robert Zemeckis for a new film.
This was our home. We lived here.
Here tells the story of a home, starting from wilderness in prehistoric times to the life of mostly one family. Hanks and Wright play a couple we see going from high school to retirement and the struggles they face over the years.
Time sure does fly, doesn't it?
Sure does.
Zemeckis is a talented director, but he often gets distracted by gimmick filmmaking. And make no mistake, Here's one camera setup perspective is the ultimate gimmick. It's got some interesting moments, but it's loaded with challenges.
Right here is where we want to be.
Here tries to show a mosaic of American families, but struggles to avoid idealizing even the toughest times. And with the fly-on-the-wall perspective, too many moments feel like stilted opening scenes from a stage play. Only the acting of Hanks and Wright carry us beyond that.
You could spend the rest of the night here.
I could spend the rest of my life here.
As real as the human experiences are in this film, the reality reveals too many insufferable characters I couldn't care less about.
Thank you for bringing us together.
Technically impressive, but dull from the story perspective, Here gets 2 bay windows out of 5. I'm Kevin Carr, and that's the way I see it.
Behind bars for Thanksgiving. But after that, nobody knows for certain. A judge has set December 11th as the date for a resentencing hearing for Eric and Lyle Menendez. The date was decided by Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge Michael Jessic after prosecutors submitted a recommendation for the brothers, who have spent the last 34 years in prison after being found guilty of the shotgun murder of their parents in 1989 in their Beverly Hills home. The brothers' attorneys never disputed the pair killed their parents, but argued that they acted out of self-defense after years of emotional and sexual abuse by their father. Much of the evidence related to abuse was excluded from their second trial. If the judge approves the resentencing, the brothers could go free after appearing before a state parole board. That's our show for today, Friday, November 1st, 2024. America in the Morning is produced by Jeff McKay. Senior producer Kevin Delaney. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One.